No one betrays the Sheik and lives.
I married the devil himself, but I fell in love with his shadow. One holds the throne, the other holds my heart. And this secret could destroy the entire kingdom today.
The roar of the crowd felt like a physical shockwave, a vibration traveling up through the soles of Elena's high heels, making her teeth ache with every pulse. She flashed the smile, specifically smile number 4, the one she'd been perfecting in front of the mirror for 3 months. Teeth visible, corners of the eyes slightly crinkled, chin held high. Below the white marble balcony, thousands of people screamed the Sheik's name, waving flags bearing the kingdom's colors. The desert sun glared off the diamonds of the necklace that weighed on her neck like a $500,000 collar. "Wave more to the left," Amir whispered sharply in her ear. To the crowd below, it looked like a moment of marital intimacy, a sweet secret shared between newlyweds. But Elena felt the grip. Amir's hand, resting on the curve of her waist, wasn't holding her, it was trapping her. His fingers dug into the delicate silk of her dress, pinching the soft skin underneath hard enough to leave a bruise by tomorrow morning. His scent invaded her senses, expensive sandalwood fighting a losing battle against the sour stench of aged whiskey and cigars consumed until dawn. "Smile, Elena," he hissed, his raspy voice clashing with the elegance of his ceremonial attire. "They pay to see the fantasy. Give them the fantasy." She obeyed. The camera flashes went off like a storm of stroboscopic lightning. The perfect couple, the desert fairy tale. Then protocol ended. Amir spun on his heels, dragging her inside the palace. The moment they crossed the threshold, the guards sealed the massive oak and bulletproof glass double doors behind them. The noise died instantly. The roar of adoration was cut off as if someone had flipped a switch. The silence in the air-conditioned hallway was absolute, broken only by the heavy thud of Amir's footsteps on the polished stone floor. He released her with a dismissive shove. Elena stumbled, regaining her balance by grabbing onto an 18th century side table. Amir was already unbuttoning his collar, his face transformed. The charismatic smile melted away, revealing a scowl of boredom and irritation. He didn't look at her. He looked through her, as if Elena were just another piece of furniture, and a tacky one at that. "Get that thing off you," he ordered, pointing at the necklace without turning around. "And don't wait up. The Russian company's new dancer arrived today. Rumor has it she has the flexibility of a viper." "Amir, today is our anniversary of," Elena began, her voice failing in her dry throat. He stopped. He turned slowly. His eyes were dark pits, devoid of any light she thought she had once seen. "You have a golden roof over your head, Elena. You have food that half my people would kill to taste, and clothes worth more than their lives." He stepped closer, invading her personal space until she could feel the heat of his breath. "Do not ask for the only thing I haven't bought, your company." He left, slamming the door to his private quarters. The echo of the crash reverberated through the empty hall, reminding Elena of the only truth that mattered in that palace. This wasn't a marriage, it was a life sentence in a velvet cell. And perhaps you, listening to this story right now, understand exactly how she feels. That sinking sensation of being trapped in a situation, in a place, whether physical or emotional. By the way, where in the world are you listening from right now? Let me know in the comments, your city, your country, because sometimes we feel alone like Elena, but the truth is, we are all connected by stories like this, scattered all over the globe. And if you want to keep following her destiny every single week, hit that subscribe button right now, because what is coming next will surprise you even more. 3 days passed. 3 days of a silence that seemed to carry its own weight, piling up in the corners of the rooms and suffocating the air. Amir had disappeared into the bowels of the capital's nightlife, or perhaps into one of his many private estates. Elena stopped asking the servants. The pitying looks from the maids were more painful than the loneliness itself. That afternoon, boredom pushed her toward the West Wing. It was an old section of the palace where the cooling system hummed with more effort and the smell of beeswax and old paper permeated the air. The Royal Library. They said Amir never set foot in there. Books are for those who lack the power to write history with their own hands, he had once said, laughing at his own ignorance as if it were a virtue. Elena pushed the heavy door open, expecting darkness and dust. Instead, she found light. The golden light of the late afternoon streamed through the tall windows, illuminating particles of dust dancing in the air like tiny fairies. And there, sitting in a worn leather armchair, was him, Amir. Elena froze, her hand still on the bronze doorknob. Her heart raced, preparing for the insult, for the mockery, for the expulsion. He was hunched over a table covered in ancient maps and unrolled manuscripts. He raised his head. Elena stepped back instinctively, but the man in the chair didn't frown. He blinked, looking surprised. And then something impossible happened. The harsh features of his face softened. He took off a pair of reading glasses. Glasses? Elena had never seen him wear glasses, and rested them on an open book. "The light is perfect at this hour, isn't it?" he said. The voice was the same, the timbre, the depth, but the cadence was different. There was music in it, a velvety softness that didn't match the man who had shoved her in the hallway days before. I am so sorry," Elena stammered. "I didn't know you were here. I thought you were at the club." He smiled, not the predator's grin from the balcony, but a shy, almost sad smile. He stood up, and his movements lacked the usual brusque arrogance. They were fluid, elegant.
"What are you reading?" she asked, testing reality. "Ibn Arabi," he replied, his eyes shining with genuine enthusiasm. "He claims love is the only true religion, that we are all just reflections of one another, trying to find the right mirror." He looked her in the eyes, really looked at her, not at the jewelry, not at her body, but inward. "I think I broke too many mirrors before I understood that," he murmured, a shadow of regret crossing his face. "Sit with me, Elena. Please. Silence here is better when shared." They talked for 2 hours. He spoke about the history of desert trade routes, about the geometry of the stars, about feeling trapped by the expectations of the crown. He listened to her talk about her childhood, laughing at the right moments, pouring more tea before her cup was empty. When the sun set, plunging the library into violet shadows, Elena felt a tear roll down her cheek. "What's wrong?" he asked, alarmed, leaning forward without invading her space. "I thought I had lost you," she whispered. "I thought the man I married had disappeared. But you are here." He hesitated. For a second, an expression of intense pain, almost panic, contorted his features. He looked at the door, then at her. "Sometimes," he said, his voice husky, "we lose ourselves to find ourselves. Go rest, Elena. It is late." He didn't try to kiss her. He simply held her hand for a second longer than necessary, a touch that promised safety. Elena left the library floating on air. There was hope. The monster was just a mask. The real Amir was inside, waiting to be saved. The next morning brought a blinding sun and an optimism Elena hadn't felt since her wedding day. She entered the private dining room. The table was set with exotic fruits, fresh bread, and strong coffee. Amir was seated at the head, reading a newspaper on a tablet, his back rigid. Elena sat to his right, the place he had offered her in the library, in spirit. The smell of coffee mixed with the scent of white roses in the center of the table. "Good morning," she said, her voice vibrating with renewed affection. Amir grunted, without taking his eyes off the screen. She wouldn't let it shake her. Last night was a breakthrough. He was just retreating into his defensive shell. She needed to remind him of the connection. She reached across the linen tablecloth and touched his wrist. "I read the poem you quoted, the one about the mirrors. It's beautiful, Amir. I kept thinking about what you said regarding the lavender tea." Amir dropped the tablet with a loud bang. The sound of the screen hitting the solid wood made the silverware rattle. He turned to her slowly. His eyes were red-rimmed, bloodshot with fatigue. There was no softness, there was no recognition, there was only cold, irritated confusion. "What the hell are you talking about?" His voice was a whip. Elena blinked, her smile faltering. "Yesterday, in the library, we talked for hours. You read Ibn Arabi to me." Amir laughed, a short, cruel laugh, devoid of any humor. He leaned back in his chair, looking at her as if she had just spoken in an alien language. "Elena, stop drinking this early. It doesn't suit your complexion." He rubbed his temples. "I haven't set foot in that moldy library in 10 years. Elena's blood ran cold. Her stomach tied itself into a tight knot. "But I saw you. You were there. We drank tea." Amir stood up abruptly, knocking his chair backward. He pulled a wad of crumpled bills and a gambling receipt from his jacket pocket, tossing them on the table right on top of the toast. "I spent the last 24 hours at the Casino Royale losing $500,000 on roulette and trying to forget I have to come back to this house," he snarled, adjusting his jacket violently. "If you spent the afternoon with someone reciting poetry and drinking flower tea, I suggest you check if it wasn't with one of your imaginary lovers." He stormed out of the room, kicking the fallen chair aside. Elena stood motionless. The silence returned to reign, but now it was terrifying. She looked at the crumpled receipt on the table. The date and time were printed in black ink, undeniable. At the exact moment she was holding her husband's hand in the library, the record showed that Amir was betting chips on the other side of the city. She covered her mouth with her hand, tasting bile. If the monster was at the casino, who was the angel in the library?
The following week was a blur of paranoia and cold silk. Elena walked through the palace corridors as if treading on broken glass, analyzing every shadow, every movement of the servants. The question hammered in her temple, a second heart beating in a rhythm of panic. Who was he? The answer came on the night of the diplomatic dinner with the Russian delegation. Elena stood before the mirror, her trembling fingers struggling with the clasp of a ruby necklace that looked like a collar of coagulated blood. Amir had spent the afternoon drinking whiskey and screaming into the phone. She expected the usual disaster. He would arrive stumbling, insult an oligarch, and she would have to smile to clean up the mess. The bedroom door opened. Elena stiffened her posture, bracing for the smell of alcohol and stale smoke. But the air that entered was clean. It smelled of sandalwood, neutral soap, and a subtle hint of mint. "Let me help," said a deep, controlled voice, vibrating with quiet authority. She turned around. The man standing there wore Amir's face, the same Italian-cut tuxedo, but the soul inhabiting that body was different. His posture was upright, military, lacking the arrogant slouch of the husband she knew. He approached, and Elena held her breath. His hands touched the nape of her neck. They were warm, firm. There was no sticky dampness of alcohol, just a gentle dexterity, as he fastened the necklace. Russians are like sharks, Elena. If we bleed, they attack. Tonight, we will not bleed. He offered his arm, not as a jailer, but as a partner. In the dining hall, under the oppressive glare of 3 crystal chandeliers, a miracle happened. The man beside her didn't just refrain from drinking, he dominated the room. He spoke in fluent, impeccable Russian, discussing pipeline routes with surgical precision that made Ambassador Petrov break into a cold sweat and loosen his tie. Elena watched him, fascinated and terrified. Amir could barely speak his own language when he was nervous. His hand found hers beneath the linen tablecloth. Elena tried to pull her hand away, a reflex conditioned by the fear of a pinch or a painful squeeze. But he interlaced his fingers with hers. His thumb stroked the back of her hand in a slow, soothing rhythm, a Morse code of protection.
I am here. You are safe. She looked at him. He didn't look back, keeping his eyes on the ambassador, but the corner of his mouth lifted in an almost imperceptible half-smile, the same smile as the man in the library. Elena's heart plummeted in her chest. The monster had stayed in the bedroom. The angel was dining with her, but angels shouldn't exist in hell. The return trip required the private jet. An emergency meeting in Geneva had been scheduled following the dinner's success, and Amir insisted Elena accompany him. At 30,000 feet, the pressurized cabin felt like a luxury confessional. The hum of the turbines filled the silence. He was sitting in the cream leather armchair, reading a dossier with reading glasses, an accessory the real Amir despised as a sign of weakness. Elena couldn't take it anymore. Doubt was an acid corroding her veins. "You hate flying," she said, her voice cutting through the chilled air conditioning. "Amir needs 2 sedatives and a shot of vodka before takeoff. You are reading about fiscal policy." He lowered the dossier slowly. He took off the glasses, folding the stems with care. Those dark eyes stared at her, stripped of the usual cruelty, filled with an ancient melancholy. People change, Elena. Not overnight, not like this. She stood up, the glass of champagne forgotten on the side table. "Who are you today? The man who calls me useless, or the man who reads Sufi poetry?" He stood up too. The space between them shrank. Turbulence shook the plane, and Elena lost her balance. He caught her by the waist before she fell. The impact of their bodies was electric, a discharge of tension accumulated over years of loneliness. His scent enveloped her, intoxicating. "I have never called you useless," he said, his voice raspy, low, dangerous. "Never. You call me worse things every day." "That man does, not me." The confession hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. He wasn't Amir. He was admitting it without saying the words. His gaze dropped to her lips. Their breathing quickened, synchronized. His hand moved up her waist, touching the curve of her back with a hungry reverence. Elena felt a gravitational pull, a desperate need to be kissed by this man, no matter who he was. He leaned in. She closed her eyes, parting her lips, waiting for contact. The plane jolted violently. He pulled away abruptly, as if he had been burned. The gentle Amir vanished, replaced by a mask of stone. He turned his back, walking toward the cockpit. "Sit down, Elena. It is dangerous to stand." She collapsed into the armchair, her body trembling not from the turbulence but from the rejection. He wanted her, she had seen it, but something terrible was stopping him from crossing the line.
The return to the palace 2 days later was marked by a storm. Thunder rattled the windows of the main foyer when the double doors swung open. But it wasn't the smooth diplomat who entered. The real Amir burst through the foyer, stumbling, clutching a bloody towel against his face. He smelled of the gutter and cheap tequila. "Damn security guards!" he bellowed, kicking a Ming vase that shattered into 1,000 pieces on the marble. "I'm going to have that croupier's hands cut off." Elena, who had come down the stairs to greet him, stopped halfway, horrified. Amir pulled the towel away. A deep, ugly cut tore across his left cheek from eye to jaw. Blood was still oozing, dark and viscous. "What are you looking at, you idiot?" he snarled at Elena, his eyes bloodshot with fury. "Call the doctor, now!" He stormed up the stairs, shoving her against the railing as he passed. Elena felt the pain in her shoulder, but her mind was elsewhere. The cut, the wound was undeniable, distinct, permanent. She ran, not to the phone, but to the east corridor, toward the window overlooking the winter garden. Her hands shook so much she could barely pull back the velvet curtains. Rain was pouring outside, but the garden lights were on. Down there, sheltered by the glass gazebo, a man was sitting in a wicker armchair. He wore a light cashmere sweater. He was calm, feeding the peacocks sheltering from the rain. He lifted his face to the moon, hidden by clouds, and the garden light illuminated his features. His skin was immaculate, flawless, no cuts, no blood. She needed answers, or she would go mad that night. She waited until the palace fell silent, until Amir's screams of pain ceased under the effect of morphine. Barefoot, with her white nightgown brushing the cold floor, Elena ran to the forbidden library. She pushed open the heavy oak doors. The room was in dim light, illuminated only by a dying fireplace. He was there. The man from the garden, the man from the plain. He was standing by the window, watching the storm, as if waiting for it. "I know I'm not crazy," Elena said. Her voice came out fragile but determined. He turned slowly. The firelight danced on his perfect, unscarred face. "You shouldn't be here, Elena. If he wakes up..." "Who are you?" She stepped forward, anger overriding fear. "Are you playing with me? Do you switch places? Is this some sick game to torture me?" He closed his eyes, an expression of pain crossing his features. "It's not a game. It is a penance." "Say your name," she screamed, hitting her hands against his chest. He caught her wrists. The touch was the spark. "Zayn." He released, the word coming out like a secret torn out with forceps. "My name is Zayn. I am the brother who died in childbirth, the brother who was hidden in the shadows so that Amir, the firstborn, could shine without competition. I am the ghost of this palace, Elena. I am the mind. He is the crown." The revelation hit Elena like a physical punch. The dead twin, the urban legend the servants whispered about. He was real. He was the man governing the country in the shadows while Amir destroyed everything in the light. "You!" Elena touched his face, verifying the smooth skin. "It was you who had tea with me. It was you on the plane." "I tried to stay away," Zayn whispered, letting go of her wrists and holding her face with both hands. "I watched you suffer for 5 years. I watched him destroy you little by little. I couldn't bear to see the light fade from your eyes anymore." Elena's tears overflowed. "Why now?" "Because I fell in love with my brother's wife," he confessed, his voice broken. "And that is a death sentence for us both." The distance between them vanished. There was no hesitation this time, no planes to interrupt. Elena threw herself against him, and Zayn caught her. The kiss tasted of salt, desperation, and rain. It was a kiss of years of loneliness colliding, a hunger that burned away any rationality. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, as if he wanted to fuse her to him. Elena gripped his sweater, anchoring herself to the only real thing she had found in that castle of lies. For a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. There was only the fire, the scent of sandalwood, and his mouth on hers claiming her. Click. The sound was dry and mechanical. Elena's blood froze. Zayn stopped instantly, the muscles of his body going rigid as steel. They looked at the library door. It was ajar, just a crack. But on the floor, projected by the hallway light, was the unmistakable shadow of a human figure holding a cell phone. Someone had seen. Someone had the proof. Zayn pushed Elena gently behind him, his eyes shifting from lover to warrior in a second. But the shadow had already disappeared down the hallway, taking with it the secret that could cost them their heads. The silence that followed was no longer peaceful. It was the silence before an execution. The click of the camera still echoed in Elena's ears when her bedroom door was thrown open. There was no knocking, no announcement, just the hardwood slamming against the wall with a bang that made the perfume bottles on the vanity tremble. Amir barged in. For the first time in months, he didn't smell like cheap whiskey or the perfume of prostitutes. He smelled of something much worse: clarity. He walked toward her with a predatory calm, his steps muffled by the Persian rug. Without saying a word, he pulled a manila envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket and dumped it onto the bed. The photos fell like dead leaves. Elena saw herself in the library. She saw Zayn's hands in her hair. She saw the kiss. The graininess of the night vision image gave the scene a criminal, dirty look, transforming a moment of salvation into treason. "I knew you were weak," Amir said. His voice was smooth, polished, stripped of any human emotion. "You conspired with a ghost. That rat living in the walls. My brother thought he could take what is mine, my wife, my kingdom." Amir pulled a radio from his belt. The device crackled with static. "The problem has already been solved, darling. I sent the Royal Guard to the West Wing 10 minutes ago. The order was simple: leave no survivors." Elena's world spun. The air vanished from her lungs. "No," the whisper came out like a strangled cry. "By now, his body should be getting dragged to the incinerator," Amir smiled, adjusting his cufflinks. "And as for you, well, the Council of Elders is gathered in the main hall. We are going to discuss your mental sanity. A crazy widow is much easier to control than an unfaithful wife." He grabbed her wrist. The grip was steel. "Let's go. The show must go on." They looked at the library door. It was ajar, just a crack. But on the floor, projected by the hallway light, was the unmistakable shadow of a human figure holding a cell phone. Someone had seen. Someone had the proof. Zayn pushed Elena gently behind him, his eyes shifting from lover to warrior in a second. But the shadow had already disappeared down the hallway, taking with it the secret that could cost them their heads. The silence that followed was no longer peaceful. It was the silence before an execution. The click of the camera still echoed in Elena's ears when her bedroom door was thrown open. There was no knocking, no announcement, just the hardwood slamming against the wall with a bang that made the perfume bottles on the vanity tremble. Amir barged in. For the first time in months, he didn't smell like cheap whiskey or the perfume of prostitutes. He smelled of something much worse: clarity. He walked toward her with a predatory calm, his steps muffled by the Persian rug. Without saying a word, he pulled a manila envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket and dumped it onto the bed. The photos fell like dead leaves. Elena saw herself in the library. She saw Zayn's hands in her hair. She saw the kiss. The graininess of the night vision image gave the scene a criminal, dirty look, transforming a moment of salvation into treason. "I knew you were weak," Amir said. His voice was smooth, polished, stripped of any human emotion. "You conspired with a ghost. That rat living in the walls. My brother thought he could take what is mine, my wife, my kingdom." Amir pulled a radio from his belt. The device crackled with static. "The problem has already been solved, darling. I sent the Royal Guard to the West Wing 10 minutes ago. The order was simple: leave no survivors." Elena's world spun. The air vanished from her lungs. "No," the whisper came out like a strangled cry. "By now, his body should be getting dragged to the incinerator," Amir smiled, adjusting his cufflinks. "And as for you, well, the Council of Elders is gathered in the main hall. We are going to discuss your mental sanity. A crazy widow is much easier to control than an unfaithful wife." He grabbed her wrist. The grip was steel. "Let's go. The show must go on." Zayn pulled a sheaf of documents from inside his military jacket and threw it onto the elder's table. "Read," Zayn ordered. "Peace treaties, trade agreements, infrastructure laws, all signed by Amir. But look at the handwriting. Look at the pen pressure. Look at the dates." The chief elder picked up the papers. His eyes scanned the pages, then turned to Amir, and finally to Zayn. Amir was in Monte Carlo when this treaty was drafted. He was passed out in a brothel when the border crisis was resolved. I have been governing from the shadows for 5 years. I am the brain that kept this country standing, while he was just the pretty face spending the treasury. The silence in the hall was absolute. "Guards!" Amir bellowed, desperate, sweat pouring down his forehead. "I am the Sheik. I order you to fire." Captain Hamid looked at Amir, a trembling, pathetic man. Then he looked at Zayn, who stood motionless like a bronze statue. Slowly, the captain lowered his rifle. "Lower your weapons," the captain ordered his men. "Salute the Sheik." The sound of boots hitting the floor and weapons being placed at ease was the sweetest music Elena had ever heard. Amir stood alone in the center of the hall. Stripped of power, he seemed to shrink. Zayn walked up to his brother. They were identical in face, but opposites in soul. "You sent assassins to my library, brother," Zayn said, low enough for only them to hear. "But you forgot that the Royal Guard is loyal to the one who leads them in battle, not the one who despises them at banquets. They warned me before you even turned off the radio." Amir swallowed hard. "What are you going to do? Kill me?" Amir tried to sound defiant, but his lips quivered. "No," Zayn replied with disdain. "That would stain the carpet." Zayn turned to the council. "The former sheik is ill. He requires absolute rest on a very distant island with no access to bank accounts, no phone, and no return." Zayn turned his gaze back to his brother. "You can leave here with your dignity and a generous allowance to live in exile, or you can stay and face a trial for high treason. The penalty is the gallows. Choose now." Amir looked at Elena. There was no love, no regret, only pure hatred. He adjusted his jacket, lifted his chin in a failed attempt at arrogance, and spat on the floor near Zayn's shoes. "Keep the crown of thorns," Amir muttered, "and keep her. You deserve each other." He turned his back and marched toward the side exit, escorted by 2 guards. The sound of the door closing was the sound of an era ending. Elena felt her knees give way, but Zayn caught her by the waist before she fell. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice trembling. Zayn looked at the elders, who were now standing and bowing deeply, accepting the new reality without question. Power had changed hands, and the world kept turning. "No," Zayn replied, turning her face to his. His eyes were clear, free from the shadows of the library. "It has only just begun." 3 weeks later, the heavy velvet curtains of the royal palace had been removed. The windows, once sealed against the sun and sound, were thrown wide open. The desert breeze drifted in, bringing the scent of jasmine and the promise of twilight. Elena stood on the main balcony. Below, in the gardens that were once forbidden, the crowd wasn't there to applaud a dictator. People walked freely. The gates were open. She heard footsteps behind her. She felt no fear. Zayn stopped beside her. He wasn't wearing the military uniform, nor the old sweater. He wore a white linen shirt, sleeves rolled up, relaxed. "They are waiting," he said, looking at the people down there. "They are waiting for the Sheik," Elena corrected. "They are waiting for us." Zayn took her hand. There were no heavy rings hurting her fingers this time, just the warmth of skin. He guided her to the parapet. When the crowd saw them, there was no manufactured, mandatory roar of the past. There was a moment of silence, followed by spontaneous applause, waves of voices calling for them. The truth had been revealed. The twin brother, the hidden savior, the new era. There were no more secrets to keep in the darkness. Elena looked at Zayn. The setting sun bathed his face in gold, highlighting the laugh lines and worry lines, so different from Amir's wax mask. "Were you afraid?" she asked. Zayn squeezed her hand, interlacing their fingers. "Of dying? No." He turned to her, ignoring the crowd for a second. "I was afraid of continuing to live without being able to touch you in the daylight." He leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of desperation in the rain. It wasn't a kiss of goodbye. It was a deliberate, calm, and public kiss. A kiss that sealed a pact not with the shadows, but with the future. Down below, the people celebrated, but high on that balcony, the only sound that mattered was the shared breath of two prisoners who had finally found the key to their own cell. Elena smiled against his lips. The castle of lies had crumbled. What remained was solid, real, and entirely theirs.